You're listening to the Virtue Podcast, brought to you by the Great Hearts Institute. Good conversations around the great conversation. Welcome back to the Virtue Podcast. Today I am joined by two experienced school leaders who are now devoting themselves to training the next generation of Great Hearts Academy school leaders. My talented colleagues Helen Hayes and Alison Chaney have decades of experience, and from that are now equipping cohorts of both current and aspiring school leaders within the Great Hearts Network. More than 40 schools, serving 27,000 students and growing, still growing. Ladies, I'm so pleased that you're able to join us here today. You must have your hands full. I know it's a little bit to take time away from your work, so thanks for finding that time to discuss it with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Helen, I'd love to start off with a question concerning some of the challenges. In fact, if you could just go straight to the top, what are some of the greatest challenges that face an aspiring school leader in classical education?
Yeah, the problem, Rob, is that we only have 30 minutes here. And there are many. And I mean, it is inherently a challenging role. And then I would say that there are, of the moment, one of the things that comes to my mind is just either ignorance of or naivety about what classical education represents. Mm-hmm. So we have a school leader right now who's working to start up a school in Baton Rouge and finds that he has to find ways to communicate with parents readily about what classical education is, and to confront misunderstandings about what classical education is. And at the same time, we have people who are informed and have been maybe listening to the news. And so it's not that they don't have any information about it, it's that they have the wrong information about it. Mm-hmm. So I would say in a broad sense, those are two biggies. And then there are lots of the of the moment thing that is also a real challenge everywhere is just hiring right now, finding teachers.
Qualified teachers that understand this model, this mission, and being able to assimilate them to the work is incredibly difficult. Both of you have served as school leaders, so for more than a decade each. Now, of course, you're working with school leaders, but the role of school leadership has changed over the past decade, or maybe even 15, 20 years. As you look back, Alison, over your time as a school leader, how has the role been altered?
I think there are many things that stay the same, especially in classical education models, but certainly over my time, I think I saw that the focus on accessibility has shifted quite a bit. And in particular, how we make education accessible, and that's for all students, some that may be dealing with anxiety-related disorders, mental health issues, special education, but what are the ways that we even serve students' basic needs in order that they can learn? And I think that's an area that as a public charter school, we have found to be a shift over the past 10 to 15 years. And I attribute some of that to the emphasis that students now devote to online interactions and social media, their access to information, maybe beyond what we normally would see for children their age online. And while there are good things about that, I think it also develops sometimes behaviors at school, feelings and emotions that run high because of things that they're doing and saying on social media. And so that's kind of a subtle shift to the second area where I've seen a change. And really the schools need to oversee some of that as it applies to their learning environment, because many times those interactions do impact their learning environment. But just back to what we were mentioning before, I think the teacher focus is really critical and has shifted somewhat in the classical education model because, we have, as a charter school network here at Great Hearts, we have recruited so many teachers over the years that in some respects we have exceeded the number of people that are really steeped in that tradition and in its pedagogy and can teach it well. And so we've had to really focus our efforts towards training and orientation and development of those teachers in the classical model. And so that's been one that has shifted a little bit in my purview.
Mm-hmm. Well, in that vein, as the role has shifted or modified over the years, I assume that you've begun to look for those characteristics of an aspiring leader that give you a clue, give you some sense that this individual probably has at least the beginnings of the right stuff, so to speak, in terms of serving as a head master teacher, right? As a head of school that really is overseeing a cadre of teachers. What questions would you be asking, Alison, if you were attempting to discern the prospect of a future or an aspiring leader?
That's right. Well, I will tell you myself, as someone who is aspiring to leadership, you have to go through your own discernment first. And that is an important period of time in thinking about whether you're ready for the workload, essentially, and also the thought load, the level of stress that you're going to experience not only during the day, but also at home while you're eating dinner. And those thoughts permeate your mind about, I wonder if I could have handled this differently, or what's coming tomorrow. And so being able to commit, especially given your own personal commitments, family commitments, to a life that is really going to engage you fully professionally, that is, I think, a big challenge for discernment for someone who's thinking about leadership. The other is that I really wish I would have asked myself this question more often, which was, do I have this strong sense of self-awareness to be able to engage with so many different stakeholders? And particularly because you're not just working with the youngest child in your school, but you're working with the most educated parent and that brand new teacher or a veteran teacher or someone that's really agitated or angry. You have to have such a good sense of yourself in how to engage meaningfully and successfully with all of the different stakeholders in the school environment. The other thing that I have both thought about for myself, but also in my recruiting role have looked for in other leaders, is their level of extroversion. And if you are a believer in extroversion and introversion, I think there's a real benefit for extroverted individuals in entering leadership because they have the opportunity to be charged by all of the people that they come into contact with during the day. But if you are an introverted person, which I naturally tend to be more in that vein, then you have to think carefully about how you're going to balance your energy load during the day and be able to have some reserves for yourself at home. And so I think that is one of the things that is important to look at, or just the subtleties of personality. I know that Helen can probably speak more to some of the characteristics and competencies that at least we humbly look for in school leaders.
Well, I just want to follow up on what you were just saying, Alison, because it is so true that self-awareness is an essential trait. And it's an essential trait, just as you said, in discerning, is this the right path for me? Is this the right next step? Am I ready? But it's also an essential trait once you have the position. And in terms of Rob's question about how you assess that, it's really hard. Because if you, in a silly way, I'll say, if you ask, are you self-aware? That's a really hard question to get right, because you might say yes, because you lack self-awareness. And if you have a tremendous amount of self-awareness, you might say no, because you're aware of your shortcomings. So it's a hard thing to suss out. But once you're in the position, that kind of self-awareness is very valuable in discerning where your strengths lie, and realistically having a truly realistic estimate of how strong you are as a public speaker, or how convincing you are, like to what extent are you able to persuade someone of something, for instance, a parent, that they should keep their student at the school, even while their student might not be as successful this semester as they would hope. So there are ways in which you have to know, am I the person on the campus who would best do this? Or is there somebody else? Is my assistant headmaster actually better at this than I am? And how can I get their assistance, harness them in the right way to have them do the tasks that I'm not as strong at. So self-awareness, huge, and patience, persistence, a willingness to stick with it. You might be starting to think, oh, this is starting to sound like a list of virtues. And I do think that for somebody who's leading a classical school, if you do not have an acquaintance with the virtues and a deep sort of heartfelt acquaintance with the virtues, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And the funny thing is that humility is right there in the game, right? So you have to have everything I just described and the ability to say, and I recognize that I have a lot of growth to do as well.
Yeah, that's well said, Helen. I've picked up on repeatedly from a variety of school leaders with whom I've interacted, both within our organization at Great Hearts, but also outside in the broader movement, that this combination of magnanimity, sort of an external willingness to make a contribution for the greater good, as well as a humility in recognizing one's own limitations, seems to be a kind of just right combination. Humble yet magnanimous. And you were touching on a variety of these characteristics. And of course, Alison, as you said, it certainly helps to be a little extroverted, draw some energy, right, from the constituents that you're serving. But I would like to go a little bit further and just ask how a would-be or aspiring leader prepares himself or herself to begin taking on responsibility, to prepare for leadership in a school. What are the thoughts there? Helen, Alison, either of you?
Well, Plutarch has an essay to a young leader. It's also translated to an uneducated leader, in which he says the best way to prepare as a leader is to study for years under a strong, adept mentor leader. And that's perfect. If everybody can do that, they're great. The fact is, what we have realized at Great Hearts is that our need for leaders outstrips the number of people who have studied for years under a great leader. And so the program that we have put together, which is called Apex, is geared to develop specific areas of knowledge that are going to be particularly useful. So when we were talking earlier about what traits do we look for, there are hard skills, right? There's instructional coaching. How much do you know about setting up, not only being an instructional coach and recognizing strong teaching, but managing a team of people who coach others? How well do you know the levers, the elements of culture, and how strong are you, and how much do you understand about operating the different levers that might be at work in developing strong student culture or strong faculty culture? How much do you understand, and how ready are you to take on communicating with parents? Both the just broad scale communications that need to happen, but also one-on-one. Parenting is an emotionally trying experience. Your heart is fully in it. And as a result, parents sometimes get extremely emotional. And so for a young leader, a newer leader, handling those extremely challenging conversations, that's very high on their list. When we talk to people who are new to it, they say, I need more help with this. I want more help with this. So in the Apex program, those are the kinds of courses that we have.
So very helpful to give future leaders an opportunity to have some kind of experience, somewhat vicarious perhaps, alongside of another seasoned leader, or at least to simulate what is likely before them as they aspire to such a position. Alison, if you just had one word of encouragement for such an aspiring leader, what would it be? What would you say to them?
You know, I don't know if I could boil it down to one word, but I think I would share that growth opportunities to grow into leadership is something we should all remember, that we're never going to start with all of the things that we need to be successful in that role. And so we have to see it as a long-term journey. And we as leaders have to be responsible for growing ourselves. No one is going to force us to do that necessarily. And so we do have to be responsible for taking that on and developing the areas that people tell us need help, and the areas that we can discern within ourselves our weaknesses, because the school leader role is a very public one, and none of us possess all of the strengths that we need to be successful in the role. Mm-hmm. And often our weaknesses are so evident to our stakeholders because it's such a public role. And so it really does involve our ability to look at ourselves carefully and own the growth that we need to be successful.
I think that's such an important thing. That microscopic attention that is given to a school leader, we've seen that time and again, and it makes it a very challenging role at times, if not for a self-awareness and, of course, the support needed to address and to be ready for those moments and to be prepared in advance to the extent that that's possible. Ladies, I am so thankful that you were able to just carve out a few minutes for us today with this conversation, because classical education in America continues to grow. Great Hearts Academies is in a growth mode. We're now in 3 states and a 4th soon to be announced. This is, in fact, I think, a next generation event. We're looking for those educators and even the entrepreneurs who are going to bring this to pass. We're really pleased at the Great Hearts Institute that our symposium is going to include a special series of program elements that will be focused on school leadership. Expect to see Helen and Alison there playing their part and sharing from their experience. Dozens of other leaders from across the country will be there with us as well. And for those interested in the Apex Leadership Program, you can simply go to our website, www.greathearts.institute, and under the resource page, you will see Apex clearly listed. So until next Tuesday's podcast, please stay connected to this classical conversation and be part of the growing network of classical ed in America. Thank you. Registration for the 2023 National Symposium for Classical Education is now open. Join us February 22nd through the 24th in Phoenix, Arizona for 3 days of unsurpassed scholarship, professional workshops, and networking opportunities. For more information, visit www.greathearts.institute. Working together to renew the tradition.